Hello, friends and fellow lovers of all things beachy. Welcome to The Beach Speaks, the podcast that shares stories about the beach and our connection to it. I'm your host and beach lover, Paige Friend, helping you reconnect with the beach, return to your soul, and reimagine your life. So grab a cool drink, relax in your beach chair, stick your toes in the sand, and enjoy this episode of The Beach Speaks. Hey, beach lover. Imagine you're about to do what might be the craziest thing you've ever done. And you're thinking, this could be crazy good or crazy stupid. Then the what ifs start to creep into your consciousness. What if something goes wrong? What if I'm not good enough? What if it turns out to be nothing but a waste of time and money? That's how I felt 3 years ago. Staring bleary-eyed at my computer monitor, my hand nervously resting on the mouse, guiding a bold black arrow across the screen, stopping to hover over a bright green button that says, Publish. I'd spent at least 100 hours working on this podcast, and my brain ached. My heart was pounding. This might be the craziest thing I've ever done. Just a simple click of a button, and I'll be taking a deep dive into the vast ocean of podcasts. Will I sink or will I swim? It's a new year, and I've been thinking a lot about this podcast and how it came to be, how what seemed like a crazy thing to do at the time turned out to be something more than just recording my voice and sending it out into the ether. It's actually helped shape how I use my voice, and more than that, it's helped me trust my voice. The sound of my voice is what most people comment on, and I like my voice. It's unique to me, and I've always had confidence in speaking. Give me something to read out loud, and I can do that, no problem. But those are someone else's words, someone else's thoughts, someone else's stories, not mine. I desperately wanted to express myself, to use my voice in a way that felt authentic to me. But how? It started with blogging. I began to read a lot of blogs, mostly about spiritual awakenings, mindful living, and life coaching, blogs like Mind, Body, Green and Daily Om. And I also volunteered to research blogs to post on Mindful Market, an online marketplace similar to Etsy that a close friend of mine had just started. And after a few months of reading blog after blog on topics and musings that people considered important enough to share with the world, I began to wonder, why didn't I start writing a blog? After all, I was an English major. I was used to writing. So I began to tell my friends, my coworkers, and strangers, pretty much anyone who seemed interested, that I was starting a blog. But I didn't know what it was going to be about. Yet. I read books on blogging, like Blogging for Dummies, blogs about blogging and content creation. This was way before AI became a thing. I even created a domain name, Seek Your Divine. But what did that mean? I had to think more about that. Then there was a question of how and where I would publish said blog. It all started to feel overwhelming, so I put the idea on the back burner. I told myself I'd get back to it when I had a better idea of what I wanted to write about, and I didn't want to waste a lot of precious time and resources on something that no one wants to read. Then podcasts came into my life. I had purchased an iPhone, not because I needed a smartphone, but I'd heard that they took great photos and you could save them right to your phone, and that texting was a lot easier than typing on a keyboard. I'd heard about podcasts, but I really wasn't sure what they were. until I pressed that purple button with the radio icon on my phone's home screen, the podcast app. It was like a whole new world of blogging in audio form. I had read a blog on Mind Body Green that Ultraman athlete Rich Roll had a podcast, and I became obsessed. Every morning, I would open the app and listen to Rich's show while getting ready for work. And then there were the NPR shows like On Being and Fresh Air, This American Life, and, the TED Talks. Hundreds of podcasts to match whatever I was interested in at the moment. I would listen while doing stuff around the house, in the car, on my way to work, on my power walks, and on my visits to the beach. There was hardly a moment in a day when I wasn't listening to a podcast. And in practically every conversation I had, I was bound to say, I heard it on a podcast, or, there's a podcast for that. And whenever I heard something that really resonated with me and maybe something I could write about in a future blog post, I would scribble some words in a notebook or on a sticky note. And if I couldn't write, I'd speak ramblings into the Notes app on my iPhone. Pretty soon, I had plenty of things to write about, but I couldn't conjure the motivation to get the blog started. I had so many excuses. There were too many blogs out there already. What did I had to add to the conversation? What if people didn't like what I had to say? And as my love for podcasts continued to grow, I began to wonder, was writing a blog really the way to express myself? Was that really my voice? Then into my life came retreats. I'd never been on a retreat before, but I'd heard several podcast episodes about them. Meditation retreats, writing retreats, wellness retreats, spiritual retreats, you name it. There seemed to be a retreat for just about anything. I ended up signing up for 3 in a row. I didn't know at the time, but these 3 retreats would be instrumental in my quest to find my voice and overcome the fear of using it. The first was called Beloved. It was an intimate 4-day retreat hosted by Rich Roll's wife, Julie Pyatt, at an upscale yoga center in Miami. It was the week of Valentine's Day, and I had just met Ernie the week before. I told Julie that the theme Beloved had to be a sign from the universe that I had manifested my soulmate. And in this intimate group of women, sharing our path of self-love and healing, I learned how to go deep within myself through yoga and meditation, and I found clarity around what I wanted to share with the world. We ended the retreat by walking hand in hand into the ocean, chanting and singing. That beloved moment at the beach really spoke to me in a profound way. The feeling that this was where I was supposed to be, at the beach. Next was Plant Power Italia, a 7-day retreat in Tuscany hosted again by Julie and her husband, my favorite podcaster, Rich Roll. It was a larger group of about 50 men and women wanting to go forward in their life's purpose and letting go of the blocks that were standing in their way. It was during this time that I decided to quit my 9-to-5 and start making plans to move to the beach. And you can hear more about what happened in the episode, I'm Out of My Comfort Zone, The Beach Speaks to Rich Roll. After Tuscany, I went to my sister-in-law Allison's retreat in Malibu. We stayed in a 3-story beach house with floor-to-ceiling windows opening out to a deck overlooking the Pacific. We were so close to the ocean that at high tide, it came up to and under the house. And the sound of the waves at night, so soothing. This retreat was a small gathering of about 8 spiritually minded women who were interested in how to listen to their soul's calling, and it was the perfect time and place to continue the work that I had begun in Miami and Italy. The intention was that each of us would participate in sharing one of our unique gifts with the group. One woman shared her Reiki practice, and another guided us through yoga. And when it was my turn, I chose to play the crystal singing bowls during our afternoon meditation. And as I began circling the edge of the bowls with the wand, and they began to resonate with that musical whoosh, whoosh, whoosh sound. I felt my voice rise in my throat, and suddenly I started singing. It was an ethereal angel mermaid spirit sound. No words. I had never done that before. At breakfast on the last morning of our stay, we shared with one another what we intended to do with our particular gifts. I told the group that instead of a blog, I was feeling led to start a podcast. But I still had a little fear. Not so much that people would listen, it was the fear of being heard. At the end of that retreat, I knew my gift was my voice, and I was being called to use it. My fear of being heard started to lessen, and starting a podcast started feeling really good. I knew how to speak into a microphone, but it was all the other things it takes to create a podcast. The logistics of it all seemed daunting. You know, there's a saying that growth begins when you step out of your comfort zone. Well, this was going to be out of my comfort zone. Since moving to the beach, my favorite thing to do is wake up early in the morning and go down to the beach to watch the sunrise. And when I stand on the shoreline and listen to the ocean, I feel such a strong connection with everything and everyone. And one morning, while sitting in the sand, breathing in that salty air and listening to the waves, I was so overcome with awe and joy of my new life at the beach. I had to share it with everyone. Then the beach spoke to me. Start a podcast about the beach. I thought, okay, now I'm going to do a podcast about the beach. What's next? I like the idea of an interview-style show where I could talk to fellow beach lovers about their life at the beach and how the beach inspires them. And it would be my way of serving the beach community, and I'd get to hear some great stories about beach life. Now I knew what I wanted to talk about. I needed to come up with a name. But Paige's Beach Podcast didn't sound quite right. Who's Paige and what beach? It had to be something that when you hear it, you know what the podcast is about. I started making a list of ideas, and then it came to me. The beach speaks. The beach speaks to me. How does the beach speak to others? Now I had a name for the podcast and roughly what it was going to be about. How do I actually go about doing this thing? Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but that doesn't necessarily mean I know how to create one. Unfortunately, there was no Podcasting for Dummies book at the time, but there were a few podcasts and blogs about podcasting and lots of YouTube tutorials about the tech I would need. Microphones, recording equipment, and editing software. Oh my. Actually, the tech part was pretty interesting. But when I thought about all the other things I needed to learn and do to produce a podcast, logistically, it felt daunting. Here are the things I had to do. Purchase a microphone and audio recorder. I was tempted to go with one made by Shure. They're used in radio and recording studios, but they're pretty expensive. So I went with the Audio-Technica AT2100, which is much less expensive and still highly recommended by audio geeks. Then I had to sign up with a podcast host, which is an online provider that stores your podcast episodes and then sends it off to all the podcast players like Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. I chose Buzzsprout because Paige Brunton, an entrepreneur business coach that I'd followed online, was starting a podcast, and she chose Buzzsprout. And I trusted her because, well, her name was Paige after all. And I didn't know it at the time, but Buzzsprout just so happens to be based right here in Jacksonville. Then there was the editing program. I had zero experience with audio editing, so I ended up choosing Audacity because it was free, and there were a ton of YouTube tutorials. And even though it took many hours and a lot of tears to learn, if you ask any small indie podcaster, what's the most difficult part of podcasting? 9 out of 10 would say editing. I launched my first episode. Rachel Todd speaks on the balanced life. Rachel and I had met at a yoga event that she hosted. She was a former Miss United States and starting a health coaching business. I told her about my podcast and how I thought she would be a perfect guest. My first guest. And it was easy to get over my fear of actually recording with a guest because Rachel was a pro. And I'd already practiced setting up my equipment at home, so when I showed up at her house, we moved some papers off her desk and I got the whole thing set up in just a few minutes. No issues. And after recording, I came straight home, downloaded the audio files onto my computer, and then uploaded them into Audacity, and then it hit me. There was a lot more to do. I still had to record an episode intro and outro, add the music. I already had the music file, Naked on the Beach, that I'd found on a free music site. I don't know, it was catchy, different, and easy to edit. And I'd recorded the main intro and outro beforehand. That was remarkably easy. It was like someone else had taken over the mic. Out came the line, "The beach is speaking. Are you listening?" I thought, well, that was a surprise. I better keep it. Then I thought, let's add at the very end a recording of Ernie's granddaughters, Emma and Reagan, saying, "Have a sea turtle day." I worked on that episode all day, every day, for about 2 weeks. I wanted it to be perfect. And I told Rachel about it and how I was wanting it to be perfect before I sent it out. And she said, "Paige, done is better than perfect. Just get it out there." I wasn't quite ready for the fear of actually publishing it. My voice was going out into the huge ocean of other voices. Would anyone like it? Would anyone even listen? That's the thing about podcasting. It's like you're speaking into a void and you have no idea if there's anyone out there. And then if anyone actually takes the time to listen, it's your voice in their ear. It's a weird sort of intimate but one-sided conversation. I listened to the audio file one last time, uploaded it to Buzzsprout, and while the file was loading, I typed in the show notes. Then the message I had been nervously anticipating appeared. "Your file has been successfully loaded." I moved my cursor to the right and hovered on that green button marked Publish. I held my breath. It's not live yet. I can still go back. But the words, "done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect," kept repeating in my mind. Still holding my breath, I thought, okay, this is it. And I clicked the green button. And in a nanosecond, the word "congratulations" appeared in a burst of confetti. It was live. And I exhaled. It might not have been perfect, but it was done. The Beach Speaks was now a drop in the ocean of podcasts, and I was ecstatic. I was a podcaster. I'd heard early on that most podcasters quit after only a few episodes in because either the host lost interest or the tech was too difficult or time-consuming. So if you had 10 or more episodes, you were considered a success. By the beginning of 2020, I had about 20 episodes published, and I was so proud of how the podcast was growing. It was still a lot of work, but with each episode I recorded, I felt more and more confident and less fearful of sending it out into the world. But then COVID came, and I was kind of stuck. Up until then, I'd been recording all my guest episodes in person. I had no idea how I was going to pull that off during a quarantine. And I didn't want to quit. I had to look for other ways to record remotely. I experimented with Zoom, but the sound was terrible and really difficult to edit. I found Squadcast. The platform and the support community opened up a whole new world of podcasting for me. I could talk to guests from the other side of town to all over the world. I joined several podcasting groups then on Facebook and Slack. I signed up for all the webinars there were, and instead of attending the PodFest conference in Orlando, I got to watch it live online. I managed to publish 5 episodes in 2020. And then the beach spoke to my heart to pivot and include more personal stories about the beach. The beach said I needed to trust my story. So I relaunched The Beach Speaks with a renewed vision of incorporating more stories about the beach and our connection to it. Now, when I listen to your stories about the beach, something interesting and unexpected has happened. I feel an even deeper connection to the beach. And I want to share more of that connection through my own stories, without the fear of being heard. And my relationship with the podcast has changed. Now, despite the many hours it takes to produce an episode, I really enjoy the process. I actually look forward to clicking that bright green publish button and seeing the word "Congratulations" pop up in the middle of the screen. I'm creating something with my unique voice, something worth listening to, and it feels really good. I feel like I've finally found my voice. I really felt it was important to start the new year by sharing this story about how The Beach Speaks came to be, because now is the time that many of us are setting intentions and creating visions for what we want to happen in the year ahead. And if you're thinking that what you want to do is crazy, well, instead of asking yourself, what if it doesn't work out? Ask yourself, what if it does? Thank you for listening to this episode of The Beach Speaks. If you like what you heard, share the podcast with another beach lover. And speaking of sharing, I want to know how the beach is speaking to you. To record a message, just go to my website, thebeachspeaks.com, click the voicemail button, it's super easy, and I'll play it on the show. And if more beach is what you crave, visit thebeachspeaks.com or follow The Beach Speaks on Facebook and Instagram, where I post all my gorgeous sunrise photos and videos. It's another way for you to reconnect with the beach, return to your soul, and reimagine your life. The beach is speaking. Are you listening?